Hey everyone, and welcome to What Did I Miss? Where today I'll be breaking down the Season 1 finale of Star Trek Strange New Worlds, and looking for all the Easter eggs and other references that you may have missed. This episode is fully ingrained with the rich history and nostalgia of the franchise, and not only introduced a younger version of one of Star Trek's most famous characters, but also showed us a different take on a pivotal storyline from its past. This week, after flirting with the idea of changing his future all season, Captain Pike is finally shown beyond the looking glass and what his sacrifice will mean to his fate and the fate of the galaxy as a whole. In doing so, we get to see Captain Pike navigate the events first told in the original series episode Balance of Terror, and I will go over all the callbacks that I could find here. But first, I want to thank you for clicking on this video, and a special thank you to all of you that have joined me throughout this season. Please don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons, as I will be coming out with many videos in the coming weeks about what this finale could mean for the series and the future of Star Trek. The title of this episode, A Quality of Mercy, is taken from the play A Merchant in Venice by William Shakespeare.
The quality of mercy is not strained. It droppeth as the gentle rain from heaven upon the place beneath.
The speech is made in an attempt to beg for mercy for another character by likening it to the power of God. This episode, though, seems to play on that notion by showing a future in which mercy, shown during one particular situation, is in fact the cause of a much larger threat. William Shakespeare is often quoted and referenced in Star Trek, usually by the villains.
Cry havoc, and let slip the dogs of war.
You have not experienced Shakespeare until you have read it in the original Klingon.
As I mentioned, this episode is a retelling of the classic original series episode Balance of Terror, and much of the dialogue and events are reimagined within this episode. But this time, we are shown how the events of this important event in the history of the Federation would have played out with Captain Pike at the helm of the Enterprise, showing the audience how one event can radically change the future of all the characters in this universe has been used many times before on Star Trek, with the original series episodes City on the Edge of Forever, the Next Generation episode Yesterday's Enterprise, and the film First Contact probably being the most well-known examples. This episode begins with Captain Pike cooking breakfast for Captain Bettel, which is also how the first episode of this series began. During a briefing with the commander of the starbase, Captain Pike realizes that the son of the commander is one of the cadets that will die in the accident that causes his disfigurement. The commander is named Commander Hansen and is the same character that was shown during the beginning of the episode of Balance of Terror. Pike makes a decision to notify the boy of his future, which will effectively change the events that follow, including his own fate. Suddenly, he is greeted by an older version of himself wearing a different uniform. The uniform he is wearing looks to be from the 2270s, which would be at least 11 years into the future from the current point. The older Pike is also wearing the rank of Rear Admiral, which would mean that this version of Pike is the same rank here as James Kirk was in the film The Wrath of Khan before he was demoted back to captain. Admiral Pike presents his younger self with a time crystal from the Klingon monks on Borath, and he also reveals that it is because of them that he is here. In case you do not watch Star Trek Discovery and are not familiar with this history, I will briefly cover it. In the Discovery episode Through the Valley of Shadows, while under the command of Captain Pike, he, along with the crew of the Discovery, are forced to travel to a planet where Klingon monks guard and preserve rare crystals that allow people to see and travel through time. After he is given a crystal, Pike is shown his future, which is the same future that he endures in the Prime timeline as shown in the original series episode The Menagerie. These time crystals allow the Discovery to travel to the future, so it makes sense that this older version of Pike was able to also travel to the past with them. Upon touching the time crystal, Captain Pike is instantly thrown 7 years into the future and quantum leaps into events shown at the beginning of the episode Balance of Terror, as that episode began with Captain Kirk officiating the wedding of two crew members and saying the same words that crewman Martine repeats to Pike here.
Since the days of the first wooden vessels, all shipmasters have had one happy privilege, that of uniting two people in the bonds of matrimony.
The age of wooden ships, all shipmasters have had a happy privilege of...
Right.
As in Balance of Terror, the wedding is broken up by a red alert, and the captain is notified by Spock that Outpost 4 along the neutral zone is under attack. Once Pike arrives on the ship, he notices that Spock is now his second in command and Una is not there. Pike also notices that now Lieutenant Uhura is at the communication station. Although actress Celia Rose Gooding did not choose to mimic the original character's hairstyle, her uniform collar has been updated to match the one worn by Nichelle Nichols. She is also wearing earrings that are very similar to those worn by the original character. Another subtle change on the bridge is that Lieutenant Ortegas and Lieutenant Mitchell have seemingly switched positions but have not switched roles, as Ortegas still pilots the ship in the episode. This does not make a ton of sense, but I suspect it was so that her character could spiritually take over the role filled by a character named Lieutenant Styles from Balance of Terror. which is that of someone who has had way too many Red Bulls and wants to fight anything. Pike decides to reveal that he is from the past to Spock, who tells him that in this timeline, no one was hurt in the accident. Given that Spock states that Pike's accident was 6 months before the events of this episode, that would mean that in the prime timeline, that Kirk took over the Enterprise from Pike right before the events shown in the original series episode, where no man has gone before. The events that occur with Outpost 4 play out much like they do during Balance of Terror, with a Romulan ship destroying the outpost, but needing to decloak to fire, which gives them away. Just as the base is destroyed, the USS Farragut arrives with Captain James Kirk at the helm. Even in the prime timeline, James Kirk did serve on the Farragut before the Enterprise and assumed command after his former captain was killed in battle. Nurse Chapel also served on the Farragut before the Enterprise and wore a pin commemorating her shipmates that served with her during this incident during the episode Memento Mori. This version of James Kirk is played by actor Paul Wesley, and he is the third actor to take on the adult version of this character after William Shatner and Chris Pine. In both this episode and A Balance of Terror, Spock and Kirk deduce that the Romulan ship that fired on the outpost expends a large amount of power when firing their primary weapon, and therefore are not aware of their presence. Also, just like in the original series episode, after intercepting a communication signal from the ship, the Enterprise is able to see the Romulan bridge, which reveals that the Romulans look similar to Vulcans. Balance of Terror was the first episode to feature the Romulans, but this is not the first run-in with the species that a ship named Enterprise has had. As on the series Star Trek Enterprise in the episode titled The Anar, the Captain Archer-led NX-01 version of the ship was forced to track down and stop a group of Romulans from using a member of the species known as Anar to pilot a remote ship that could attack Earth. However, in that episode, the Romulans, while being revealed to the audience, were never shown to the crew, so canonically, this is still the first time anyone from the Federation has seen a Romulan. The bridge design of the Romulan ship seems to follow the design of the Romulan base used on the Enterprise series, which itself is just a darker version of the bridge shown on Balance of Terror. When the reveal is made, the music used in the scene is the same used on the original series episode. Spock even sports the peaked eyebrow that you have seen so many times before. Bridge crew convenes in the ready room to go over a plan of action, and a well-known member of the original crew is missing, as Dr. McCoy is not a part of the meeting, and instead Dr. Mbenga is there. Even though it is a different doctor, Mbenga takes on the same perspective that McCoy had, which is that they should not attack the Romulan ship. However, both Kirk and Spock agree that by not attacking the ship it will show a weakness to the Romulans. This is another callback to Balance of Terror, as both also agreed in the prime timeline that attacking the ship was the correct course of action. This led the Enterprise to attacking and disabling the Romulan ship eventually, but in this timeline, because of Captain Pike's reluctance, that does not occur. However, just like in the original timeline, the Romulan commander outsmarts them both and is able to position the ship behind the Farragut. Kirk calls out,
"Attack pattern Tiberius 4.
which is a reference to James T. Kirk's middle name Tiberius, which was revealed in the film The Undiscovered Country. After the Farragut is disabled, the crew is beamed over to the Enterprise, which includes now Commander La'an Noonien Singh. It is also worth noting that La'an is now wearing her hair down and easily hugs Captain Pike after being very rigid in the show's first season. This hints that the character will grow into a much warmer character in the coming years. After debating the next action, Captain Pike offers the Romulan ship a ceasefire. This is the moment in which the two timelines really diverge, because in Balance of Terror, Captain Kirk decides on destroying the Romulan ship before it reaches Romulan space, and even allows the Enterprise to enter the neutral zone in order to do so. But in showing mercy to the Romulan ship, Captain Pike unknowingly sets into motion events that will result in a darker future. On the Romulan ship, the commander and the sub-commander argue in a similar fashion as they did in the original episode. The commander reminds him that he served with his uncle during the Reman campaign. The Remans are an alien species that populate a planet named Remus that is in the same solar system as Romulus. Their first appearance was in the film Star Trek Nemesis, and the race is shown to have been subjugated by the Romulans. As Kirk leaves the Enterprise on his own mission, Spock goes to help repair the phasers, where a familiar voice can be heard assisting him.
Aye, that's the one. This is where the auto repair was getting hung up. She's pretty fused.
Although never referenced by name on screen, this is undoubtedly the voice of Chief Engineer Commander Montgomery Scott, who has been played by both James Doohan and Simon Pegg. Since the current Chief Engineer on the Enterprise, Hemmer, sacrificed himself in the last episode, it is likely that Scotty will appear on the ship played by a new actor, perhaps next season. Scotty says the line,
"I'm an engineer, not a miracle worker, Mr. Spock."
which is a reference to the famous colloquialism that Dr. McCoy would use when stating that he was a doctor, not a something.
I'm a doctor, not a coal miner. I'm a doctor, not an escalator. I'm a doctor, not a...
Scotty also states that he is not a miracle worker, which is a reference to the fact that Starfleet engineers are often seen as miracle workers, thanks largely to his efforts on the Enterprise. After the 2-hour ceasefire is up, the Romulan fleet arrives, and the Romulan Praetor demands that the Enterprise surrender. Then Captain Kirk arrives with a fleet of mining craft that are meant to represent a Starfleet armada. The ships that Kirk arrives with are the same equipment that the Enterprise provided the outpost at the beginning of this episode. After it is revealed to the Praetor that the Enterprise has evidence of one of their ships destroying an outpost, the Praetor decides to destroy the vessel. The speech that the Romulan commander gives before he is destroyed is almost exactly the same one given by the Romulan commander in Balance of Terror.
To beam you and your crew aboard, you don't have to do this.
It is not our way. I regret that we meet in
this way. You and I are of a kind.
In a different reality, I could have called you friend.
What purpose will it serve to die?
We are creatures of duty, you and I.
I've lived my life by it. Just one more duty to perform.
The Enterprise is able to escape, but at tremendous cost. Not only is the ship badly damaged, but Spock is also hurt in a very similar way that Captain Pike would have been injured in his accident. As important as Captain Pike is to the future, it is revealed to him by his future self that Spock is much more important and, among other things, is vital to the relationship between the Federation and the Romulans. This is directly referencing the work that Spock does in the Next Generation episode Reunification that showed Spock work with a group of Romulans to find a common path for them and Vulcans. Admiral Pike also briefly looks at a picture of himself with Robert April, possibly when then Captain April handed over the Enterprise to Pike, since Robert April is the first man to be the captain of the ship. As they are talking, James Kirk arrives and they discuss the mission before Pike asks Kirk to tell him about himself. This is a pretty cool moment when you realize that in the Prime timeline, Kirk and Pike never actually get to talk like this, as Kirk explains in the episode The Menagerie that he only met Pike briefly when the Enterprise was handed over to him. After returning to the present and deleting the memo he was writing, Pike looks up the record of James Kirk. Much of the information listed is also listed in his personnel file shown in the original series episode Court Martial, such as his assignments on the Farragut and the USS Republic before that, as well as his commendations. The record also states that Kirk was a witness to the massacre at Tarsus 4. These events were revisited in the original series episode The Conscience of a King, where it is revealed that Kirk survived on a planet in which half of the inhabitants were wiped out by its leader in an effort to fend off starvation for the greater population. Finally, under training, the term hyper-powered circuits is listed. This may be a reference to another Star Trek episode that used a phrase from Shakespeare in its title, the first season episode Dagger of the Mind, in which hyper-powered circuits are used to power the security field surrounding a penal colony that the crew is able to disable. Before the episode is over, Captain Battelle returns to the Enterprise and arrests Number 1 for violating the Federation ban on genetic engineering. It was revealed earlier this season in the episode Ghosts of Illyria that Una was not human and was an Illyrian who had been genetically modified. I have a theory about what is going to occur with her character that I will release in the coming weeks, so make sure that you are subscribed so that you do not miss out. Well, that was everything I saw, but let me know in the comments if I missed anything. Thank you very much for watching this video. Please hit that like button if you have enjoyed it, and I will see you next time on What Did I Miss?